Hey, welcome everyone. Today's webinar, transitioning from the MIM portal to Microsoft Entra ID. This is part 2 of our series. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the high-level overview and reasons why you should be moving from MIM to Entra ID. Today, we're going to focus more on the MIM portal. So a little agenda today. Of course, just review the MIM portal. We're going to go over common use cases that you have in the MIM portal, the role of the sync engine still in a hybrid identity. Then we're going to talk about how we can move the MIM portal to Microsoft Entra ID, some of the solutions there. And we're talking about solutions. We'll talk about the different licensings you might need. And then finally, if we are successful here in moving the MIM portal over to Entra, how do we remove it? How do we decouple it from your sync engine? So we have a couple of slides here that if anyone has attended these webinars are probably very common for you. We're going to get through this. Usually try to pick something out from one here. So, hey, if you're looking into external identity and some of the B2C solutions that you've had to take upon in recent years, give us a call. We got some excellent folks here working with external identity. All right, so the MIM portal, go back to our little timeline here. We talked about at the last webinar, 2010 did bring upon the MIM portal. So it's amazing. It's been around 15 years already. As we talked about MIM being around by end of support for almost 30 years. Oh, actually 30 years. So let's talk a little bit about the MIM portal. So since it is Thursday, it's a little bit of a throwback Thursday picture here. If anyone in the identity space worked with FIM, MIM, MIS, ILM, they remember when the FIM portal came out with this really cool diagram. It looked really modern. Everyone was, really excited. We could do all this new stuff. We had this archaic console, seemingly, with MIS, ILM. Now we get to use this really cool portal, all these different, modern services, and we were able to use all these cool interfaces. Honestly, I don't know if all this stuff took off, like using those FIM clients to automatic, approve from emails or, not approve. That was a big lift for clients to put all those agents or, clients on those workstations. But seemed like, the MIM portal was the way to go. Over the years, hey, you can say what you want about the MIM portal, FIM portal. Um, we'll talk about some of the use cases here. It might have took some time to gain some traction, but do believe a lot of people started using it. So the reasoning for this webinar is, um, can we take these use cases that we use in the MIM portal and move them to Entra ID? Thinking that, since this kind of is a web-based graphical user interface, that was given to us 15 years ago. Can we move it to Entra ID? Entra ID kind of, is a place where it's a little similar, a little, it's UI. It's obviously a web portal we go to. So we'll examine these use cases and see how we can move over. So out of the box, Active Directory group management, that was the one thing that the MIM portal did. It was very quick to configure. It gave you those approval workflows. Those were boxed together, and email notifications. Though that was one thing that was coming out of the box. I can create a group. I could provision it to Active Directory. I could populate it with users, either with criteria-based group. Someone could request it. Someone could approve it. I'd get email notifications. I could bring in my existing groups and manage them and do all the same stuff there. So of course, the group management approval workflows besides groups, you can put an approval on any type of change in the MIM portal, or if someone's requesting something, they could be approved for it. How many times do we email someone when something happens? Those are very common. When a user arrives, we're going to email their manager or that person that here's your information about you, here's your account, here's your email. Uh, Possibly we'd give them a password. We'll talk about that later. But that was very common approach. Self-service password reset, that was part of the portal, separate web portals, one for registration, one for resets. Um, we're not going to investigate this too much today, but the self-service password reset in Entra ID, can't believe it's probably been around for almost 10 years now. A lot of people have already moved to it. We're not going to talk about it much today, but it's one thing you can uh, move over to Entra ID if you haven't already. Workflow activities, again, bringing more of the graphical UI into identity management. So if you didn't want to write specific code or you didn't have employees that knew how to write code, they could come up with some business requirements and allow them to program it without knowing code and having activities fulfill requests. Wanted to bring up synchronization rules because if you need to move over everything and remove your MIM portal, it's something that might be a showstopper. So we'll talk about that later. But that again, that was another big thing that the MIM portal, FIM portal brought. These synchronization rules was again more of a codeless solution to provisioning accounts. So the MIM sync rule. So in this solution or in this phase, if you're trying to move your whole MIM environment to Entra ID, we're still going to keep the MIM sync engine. But we're going to look at those use cases we just talked about, and we're gradually going to move them over to Entra ID. So our groups, SSPR, our email notifications, our approvals, our activities, those are all going to be moved over to Entra ID, and we're going to decouple the MIM portal from the sync engine. Uh, the sync engine is still going to use its data sources, its HR, student, any type of directory it uses as a source of truth, and it can provision all that information to Active Directory, which will be your sync to Entra ID. Any other connectors that you might have, they'll still continue to run. If you're writing back information to a database, if you're writing maybe to an LDAP directory, we're not going to look at that today. We're just going to focus on the portal, but we can be in a hybrid approach still here, but we're just moving the portal to Entra ID. So group management was one of those common use cases. Lots of ways you can manage groups in Entra ID today. The self-service group management, I don't know if it's heavily used. Some people may use it, but this is probably the tool most close to managing groups that you managed in the portal, in the MIM portal, as that was owner-based. So an owner could manage their group, an owner could approve requests, an owner could deny requests. So that was your self-service group management in the portal that's been moved to Entra ID. If you're looking for a way to replace your criteria-based groups that are dynamic groups, they've been around for a long time also in Entra ID. This gives you the ability to fill out criteria so people or users are automatically added to that group. So PIM for groups, that's kind of new. It's been out for about 2 years. If you've used privileged identity management, at first it was used for Azure roles and Entra roles to manage, so you can elevate yourself to a role for elevated privileges. But they did come out with PIM for groups, so you have the ability to elevate yourself to a group. Um, you know, PIM for groups allows more of a one-off access to a group, so you don't have to have owners. You can, you can do access approval, access packages with groups in those resource groups. But what if you only want to have someone request one group? an access package sometimes can have multiple groups in there as resources, and you don't want someone to have access to all those resources. So PIM for groups is a way to get around those one-off groups. And then we have access packages. Again, part of entitlement management in Entra ID. Access packages allow you to move more of your requestable and criteria-based groups with less configurations. Let's say you have 10 criteria groups in the MIM portal, and a lot of times they could be the same criteria. Department equals sales, but sales group has 10 groups. I had to create a criteria-based group for each one of those groups. So in Enter ID, I can create an access package, put all those 10 groups in there as resources, and I can create um, one criteria. It's an automatic assignment policy in access packages. We'll talk about the license later, but that just took the time to create 10 groups, then create one access package. Now I'm done. So when someone becomes, a in the, they're in the sales department, that policy will add that person to that access package. They'll gain access to all those groups. Um, and again, access packages give you the ability to do access reviews. You can't do that in the MIM portal. I'm sure your auditors will love that you have the ability to do that. And a final piece here for group management is lifecycle workflows. This is more criteria based to add users to groups, but you are fixed on triggers like hire and end date for your joiner and leaver templates. Um, Mover templates could give you more flexibility as you can use attributes that you choose to trigger an add or a remove group. But it's really about your design, how you are designing your group management. I can similarly do the same thing with an access package as I can for our lifecycle workflow, but they can be different just depending on you know how you're designing, if people are still going to Active Directory or are you going cloud only. Lifecycle workflows might be better for a cloud only solution. Access packages with automatic assignments could be better if you're still mastered in an Active Directory. Also, workflow history can be seen for 30 days. So you can look at when someone was assigned a workflow and the different tasks that run there. It does have great workflow history in there, but it's only there for 30 days. And if you need it longer, you're going to have to look into send it to maybe a log analytic and saving that data. Access packages give you a little more auditing back. I looked at an access package today. I saw that I was assigned to it 2 years ago. So you don't need the advanced log analytics there. So we have our group management, but in the MIM portal, that was all built in on-prem. I'm managing Active Directory accounts. So now we have the ability to manage Active Directory accounts on-premise. So Microsoft Entra ID Cloud Sync gives you the ability to do that. It was introduced a couple of years ago with Entra ID Connect. Back then it was Azure AD Connect. You had the ability to do group write back. It first started with exchange groups, distribution groups. Um, it went into like a public preview of security groups, but it never went GA. They decided to put this functionality into the Entra ID Cloud Sync solution, which has been moving everything that you do in Enter ID Connect today. Microsoft's been slowly moving everything over to their solution going forward in the future is only they're going to have, they would prefer everyone on Cloud Sync. Not everything's there now, but some of the good things about it is it's agent based, so you don't have to have one of those servers and a staging server waiting. Agent based gives you the ability to configure that and load balance it without turning one off and turning the other one on. Uh, but the thing to know about Cloud Sync, this might not solve all your group write back solutions, but depending on your environment, things to understand about this, it's only creating security groups. Um, so think about that. groups have to only contain on-premise synced users. Again, that's similar to MIM. MIM, you had to have a user in a group that you're managing in MIM joined in your connector space and joined up. So not much difference there, but something to think about. On-premise groups are created with a universal scope. If you're thinking about doing nesting, be careful with that. You can probably read some articles on Learn in Microsoft that you'll write back these groups and nest them to the existing group that you're using for the permissioning for the application or some type of entitlement that understands AD groups, but understand it is a universal scope. So if you have global groups, if you want to nest it, you're going to have to change it to a universal scope. Just that, and of course, any type of built-in group, you're not going to be able to manage with a nest. It's not going to be supported, obviously, domain admins, and don't even think about using, group right back to update domain admins. It's not going to work, and Microsoft is not going to tell you that PIM is a PAM solution. So just wanted to bring that up. Some of the things that you do need to look at is 50,000 members. That's where it's capped, the amount of memberships that you can write back. I would look at this space. It's going to grow. If you looked at the version of the public preview with Entra ID Connect, they were supporting up to 250,000. So I'm sure this number is going to go up. And the other thing to think about here is reconciliation of the groups. It's not supported. Reconciliation meaning that if I add someone locally in Active Directory, the next time the Entra ID sync runs, kind of like in the MIM portal, when that ran, if someone added someone manually, they're going to be removed. MIM is making sure whatever's in that group that it manages, it's going to make sure it's synced to that on-premise AD. So the Cloud Sync group write back solution is not going to take that person out. If they're in there, they're going to stay there. But one of the things you can think about, since you are moving to Entra, is if you do have a P2 license entitlement management, you can do access reviews. So access reviews can be done so you can look at them, approve, and make sure people in that group should be still in there. If you don't have access reviews and you're really worried about people still adding, out of band in there, maybe, these sync groups, which you do specify a certain OU that they have to be in, if you really wanted to put some security on that OU, so maybe only admins have access. Another way would be, to come up with some exception process. You could create a dynamic group in your tenant. That one's going to be written back. That dynamic group could be looking at there's a new solution. Well, maybe it's been around for over a year now, but I can create a dynamic group to look at two other group for the membership. So I can merge them into one group. I would use that group to write back. So one could be, the two groups I'm looking at, one's dynamic, and the other one is manual assignment. There's my exceptions. So I don't have to do it on-prem. So that's group management. We have a lot of options now to move group management over to Entra ID from the MIM portal, which was an out-of-the-box solution in the MIM portal. So the other use cases that we talked about in our first slide, one of our first slides was we still have approvals, we have activities, we have notifications. Working off of the group management, a lot of times it was approval based. So for approvals in Entra ID, access packages offer approvals. Privilege identity management, that offers approvals. So if you do need someone to approve a group, not just Azure roles or Azure or Entra roles, you can create a group and have it approved with PIM. Of course, the added functionality is here that MFA can be used to activate access for that group. MFA cannot be used for access packages if you want some more verification, but you can use a verified ID. Not talking about verified ID today, but it is an approach that is in an access package that if you did set up verified ID in your tenant, or if it's from another tenant that's available in the Microsoft ecosystem, you can say, show me your verified ID. I can gain access to the access package. So um, those are the certain workflow approvals that you can do. Workflow activities. A little bit different. Those activities that were in the MIM portal, there were a bunch of them that were out of the box at first, but not many. And a lot of people had to write their custom activities, which, if you weren't really a programmer, were very, they were hard to write unless you had some development skills. So you had to depend on consultants. Some vendors out there wrote some until the MIM came out. MIM was great because it gave you a lot of functionality without writing code, and you could do a lot more. So workflow activities in Entra ID, that's where we're going to move over to using lifecycle workflows. Lifecycle workflows is a Entra ID governance license that's needed, but these are going to automate your joiner, mover, and leaver processes with pre-built templates and pre-built tasks to complete different activities. Uh, we've done webinars on lifecycle workflows in the past. I'm not going to talk too much about them, but these lifecycle workflows are giving you the capability of moving some of your MIM portal activities over to Entra ID. If you're looking to customize, because some of those tasks aren't doing what you need, the common ones, of course, are sending emails, adding people to groups, adding people to access packages, enabling an account, disabling an account, um, adding people to a license. So there are about over 20 pre-built tasks in there. If it's something there's not a pre-built task, you can create a custom extension. Once you create that custom extension, it will have you create a logic app. And logic apps, if you do go to Microsoft Learn and look up logic apps, you can do pretty much anything with a logic app. You can request data to get new data. You can parse data. You can do date time functions. You can go out to other services with a connector. You could use a ServiceNow connector to connect and do something. So there's pretty much I wouldn't say unlimited, but thousands of tasks that you could do with custom extensions. Those would be probably your primary way you're going to move workflow activities over. Final thing is notifications. Notifications are built into lifecycle workflows, but one thing you do need to understand is that the to field is only to the user and the manager. There is a CC field in there, which you can specify anything in your tenant. So if you have, of course, any user with a mailbox or a distribution list that is in your tenant in your Exchange Online, you can point it to that, but it is CC only. So you do not have access to the to for something custom there, but you do have the ability to customize that email. So if you do need to customize your notification to send it to a specific person or a distribution list, that's where you would have to create another custom extension with a logic app. So very, very simple to do with those. There are tasks in there to choose Office 365 and send an email, and the ability to reach out, find the email address, store it, and use it in your email. So we've gone over our use cases. So now, once we've moved over, we're still using the sync engine. We're still using our on-prem source. We're provisioning to Active Directory. We're getting synced up, but really what we're using are lifecycle workflows, access packages, but and we're sending emails out, we're managing groups. But the other thing to think about, if when you're moving something over to Enter ID, you are getting other things involved here. Oh, now I can manage enterprise applications. I don't need a group now for every application. I can just add that person to an enterprise application using a lifecycle workflow or an access package. The days of having a group for each application are gone by moving over. Microsoft Teams, I can add you to a Teams. I can add you to a SharePoint site. Um, I can call a Logic app if I need something more custom. There's some public preview to add people to PIM roles. So there is a lot more you can do that you had in the MIM portal when you move over to Enter ID. And of course, we have our right back. So if I am managing groups in my Enter ID tenant, I have the ability to write it back. So that takes the MIM portal process that we had before and still has that functionality. So some of the licensing that we need, what we talked about, self-service password reset. If you haven't done it, and you still are using the FIM and the MIM password reset, I would recommend moving over. But it does need a P1 license. The self-service group management is a P1 also. Again, not haven't seen too many clients use it, but if you really need that MIM FIM portal group management with owners and have the ability to request and approve it or deny it, that does take a P1. Dynamic groups, everyone's using those. If you're not using group-based licensing with a dynamic group, um, you're doing yourself a disservice there. So again, a P1 license. But if we want to step up and have more approvals, some more security, and some more checking, the PIM for groups does need a P2 license, as privileged identity management is needed, and P2 is needed for that service. Access packages, there's two things here. P2 does give you basic entitlement management, which gives you access packages and access reviews. But if you want to automate that assignment, uh, a policy, just like a dynamic group, it's the same interface. So if I want engineering team to automatically get added to this access package based off of their department, I do need an Entra ID governance license. Privileged identity management, similar to PIM, if we're using that, we talked about a bit. That is a P2. The lifecycle workflows, that interface you can't even get into without an Enter ID governance license. And we talked about logic apps. That is not a license, but it is a pay-as-you-go model. So you would need to have a subscription that you can bill to there. And if you look at the Logic app pay-as-you-go model, it really comes down to a consumption plan. Charges are based on the number of executions for those triggers, those actions, and the type of connector you use. Some are standard, some are enterprise, and then there's a standard plan. This plan supports local development. It's more of a fixed. It's really a VM that you get, and you pay. A fixed monthly cost. But again, that charge is based off of the type of connectors you use. All right, so we've we decided we want to move MIM. My thought is, let's move some of the things like the MIM portal over to Enter ID because a lot of it is similar. We talked the last webinar, we talked about the MIM portal and really Sync is pretty simple. It sits there, you have one SQL Server database to manage. MIM Portal has a lot that you have to manage. So that's my thinking of here. If we want to start, removing servers and not using the MIM Portal, you have to manage SharePoint. You have to, manage those portals. If you have SSPR, those are two separate portals you have to manage. Again, a SQL database, you know, anytime you've upgraded in SharePoint didn't work right, you've had issues. So my thoughts there is it's a lot of overhead to manage. So why don't we move this all to our tenant? But before we do that, let's look at a few things. I mentioned before sync rules. So are sync rules being used? This could be a showstopper to totally removing your MIM portal, because if you are using sync rules, those rules still need to be imported into your sync engine. So anything that you do have to change, like an attribute flow, if you make that change, you do have to import it from your portal MA down to the sync engine into your metaverse. So that's something to think about. Maybe you moved everything else and you're just going to keep it there and run it once in a while, make that sync so you get your new roles down to your metaverse. Also look at, does the MIM sync provisioning extension rely on MIM portal attribute updates? Um, we've gone with some designs where, giving people access to certain connectors or applications we didn't do in code. We left the code as simple as possible, but we allowed people to make their changes in the MIM portal. So maybe we had a multi-value attribute in the MIM portal that we added to if someone needed exchange or like a SQL connector. So that would get imported into your metaverse. And we could say, if you had this value in this attribute, provision it to this connector. So a lot of clients might have that type of functionality in the portal that they have to look into, and they're going to have to change their code in the sync engine if they really want to get rid of them in portal. Which brings me to precedence. A lot of times I've used the MIM portal. Other organizations have used the portal as your contributing, MA in case you lose something. I'd like to bring the employee ID back in from the MIM portal because for some reason HR decided to remove that person and I don't have an employee ID because when they come back, that employee ID was removed and I can't join again. So I added it as a flow so I can always contribute it back so I have something to join on. So that's something to look at. And finally, I have metaverse deletion rules. Um, might be a last thing people think about, but metaverse deletion rules, a lot of times you could be using them in Portal as a simple way to say, if this management agent, this connector is no longer available, delete the metaverse record. Because maybe I have a process in the portal that I'm using some uh, activity to delete the user. And that's how I can simply delete the metaverse object. So those are some things you need to look at before you remove your MIM portal. So if everything is removed, I'm good. I don't have any of these bullet points. Maybe if you want to do this in stages, rather than just shut your server off and throw it away, start disabling your MPRs. So as you move stuff over, disable the MPR so it's not needed. So if you do disable it and someone comes knocking saying, hey, this isn't working anymore, you know that people are still using certain processes. Remove your run schedule. There's no need to sync anything anymore. So that's something simply you don't have to sync from the MIM portal to your sync engine. Again, people might say, oh, this process isn't working. And you might find out, oh, yeah, we were sending something up there that we forgot about. And then disable the MIM service. Rather than turn the server off, disable your MIM service. So again, people could be using some external process to create users by using some scripts. You didn't know about it or it wasn't documented. Again, if you disable it, people put in a ticket, complain, something easily you can turn back on. And of course, if nothing comes back, you always had a game plan here to easily turn things back on. You can retire your MIM portal server. So we did have some people submit questions before the webinar. I took a few out of here so we could talk about them. Custom PowerShell, of course, MIM portal activity. If you had the MIM wall or if you had some other activity that someone wrote, a lot of people would run PowerShell. Everyone loves PowerShell. Of course, this comes up. There's a way that you could run PowerShell. You could use Azure Automation runbooks. It's called from a Logic app with a custom extension. So You could create a lifecycle workflow that call let's just say I'm updating Exchange mailbox based off of someone's department changing, or maybe it's a leaver solution scenario where someone leaves. Uh, my lifecycle workflow kicks off. It runs some tasks. Last task it does call this custom extension. That logic app is configured to connect to Exchange and change uh, disable their mailbox, or maybe send mail to their manager. So that's way you can call a PowerShell workflow. So I would look at Azure Automation runbooks there. If it's something that you're doing on-prem, look at Azure Arc. It's Azure Arc's a service that extends Azure management to um, services, and whether it's on-prem or on the edge or a multi-cloud environment. That's a way that you can connect to different locations or on-prem. Because if you don't have like a express route from your tenant to your on-prem, there are ways now that you can connect to on-prem resources. So how do we migrate away from dynamic sets as we move to Entra? So a set being in the MIM portal, basically a criteria of users. Dynamic groups and auto assignment access package policies work like dynamic sets. You create the criteria there, and people can be automatically added. Um, User scopes. A lot of the processes have scopes now, so a lifecycle workflow will run, but I could put only a scope of users on there. I want it to run, but I only want it to run on a certain department, so I can put a scope similar to a set. HR and API-driven provisioning, which we'll probably talk about in the next um, webinar for part 3. They use the concept of scopes also. You don't want to use you don't want to put provisioning on everyone that's coming into your service. I want to scope it on certain users. So I have like a dynamic set which I run a management policy on. I'm going to use a user scope in various different ways in Entra. So how can we migrate advanced MIM wall lookups, queries? We kind of covered it in the workflow activities. Lifecycle workflows can be used, but there are only about 20 to 25 built-in tasks. If not, you need to use a custom extension, which we'll call a logic app. So a logic app can do the lookups of a user to find their manager, to find their manager's email, to store that data, to send the email, maybe bring it back to your workflow. So there are those capabilities. I'm not saying that it's going to be apples to apples, but the functionality is there. It just might not be, as a one pane of glass way to do it, because you do have to understand how to create the custom extension, then go to your Logic app and build it. But Logic apps are very powerful. We had this question last time, but I don't know if we really talked about too much, because I know Microsoft's been talking about password sync. So how are we going to manage password syncs between multiple domains when MIM goes away? More of a sync engine question, but came in, put it in there. I would start thinking that it's not going to be a solution in Entra. The PCNS service is not going to be used anywhere in Entra. Microsoft is modernizing. That's why they're going cloud only. Modern auth and authorization protocols, they want to be passwordless. They do not want a password anymore. So they're not going to work on a password sync solution. We have till 2029 for MIM and PCNS to be available and supported, but if you do need to sync passwords, I'm sure there will be some third-party tools out there that can still do it. But I would also looking to go passwordless. And then custom attribute flow extensions, there were a lot of questions about that. That is going to be covered more on our third webinar, which will be user provisioning with Microsoft Entra ID, which is our next slide here. So If you haven't registered yet, use our QR code. We're going to talk about now moving the MIM sync engine. Uh, it could still be around, but we're gonna try to move as much as we can over to Entra ID. Uh, but that's it for today. I'll take a look at the questions and answers. If you have time, register, hit that QR code. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go look at some of these questions now. We've got a question about the group membership, understanding group memberships over 100K. Um, the first thing I would just say, wait in this space. I know those numbers are going to go up. Also, look at what are groups being used for. If you have 100,000 people in those groups, are they really needed to be in those groups? Can I assign them to an application now, or can I automatically assign them to teams? Is a group still needed for that? The other question was a SSPR question. So you're currently using the MIM portal to reset on-prem users' passwords. These are for non-SSPR users and accounts. What can we offer them? So I'm assuming it's more of a custom activity going out to reset passwords for on-prem. Yeah, SSPR Enter ID, they would have to be in your tenant for that to happen. You probably could do something similar with a logic app. If I'm thinking this correctly, that if you do need to set a password on-prem, a logic app with that Azure Arc would be able to reach out to your on-prem AD and reset it. So it would be a logic app that takes a look, finds the users, and has the ability to reset their password. Is PIM using for any type of using PIM to connect to on-prem Active Directory as a privileged access management solution? Microsoft recommends no. It's truly not a privileged access management solution. So yeah, I would agree too. Just because it takes time for permissions to sync. It is on a schedule, so it's not automatic, and it's really not a fully functioning you know access management solution reaching out outside of the tenant. PIM is automatic within the tenant and can elevate your role as needed, but it's not recommended. Like I said, even if you could, I wouldn't recommend it for managing privilege rights in certain resources outside your tenant. There's some questions about licensing. You know, we put up there what license you need. Unfortunately, you would have to work with your account manager from Microsoft or your reseller about what you would pay for a license. It depends on what your agreement is there. As for something like a Logic app, pay as you go, that is more set. I don't know if Microsoft changes that for any of their customers and gives them a discount on pay as you go. But um, definitely with your enterprise agreement for your licensing, that's going to be determined by um, your account manager. A couple more questions about using PIM to local AD. Again, I would not recommend it if it's something for elevated rights. All right. Thank you all. Hope to see you in 3 weeks.